Nice one, Hitchhiker. I got both of them! I got all three!
You killers, you pussies.
What do you say to me? I'm going to eat you. Yeah, you're gonna teabag me? I'm gonna put the chainsaw up your ass, buddy. You're dead! You're dead! You're not gonna win the game! I'm going to win the game! Texas Chainsaw Massacre, one of the most popular and influential horror movies of all time, released in 1974 to overwhelming success. So much so that it spawned 9 more entries into the franchise, 3 of which being reboots and 1 an unreleased spin-off. And while some of these additions gave way to great expanding lore or creating iconic shots, not all of them were received very well.
Try anything and you're canceled, bro.
Regardless, it was only a matter of time before Texas Chainsaw Massacre got their own video game too. Tons of movies had their own adaptations, such as Alien Isolation, Friday the 13th, and even Saw. And while I really enjoyed games based off of movies, adaptations of games are not very good.
Oh. Maybe not.
When TCM's game was announced in 2021, I and many others were very excited. Sure, the early footage looked a little bit clunky, but hey, this was the team that helped bring Friday the 13th to life, and we were all hungry for a game to finally break the horror ASIM curse. Countless games have been released, and yet nothing has survived. But what do these games have in common? Sure, they have developmental issues, lack of marketing, but more importantly, weren't making enough money. DBD, the most popular ASIM, never really reacted to competition, because they always seemed to shoot themselves in the foot. TCM had a boundless amount of potential that was severely mishandled at every step of development post-launch. Whether it was community managers going on tirades or simply making promises they would never keep, TCM's reputation dwindled quickly and people quite frankly had enough. But what was the driving factor for the game's failure? To answer this, let's analyze the lifespan of TCM's development, and as always, I hope you enjoy. After much anticipation, TCM's beta finally arrived in late May of 2023, and it was absolutely phenomenal. The game was incredibly refreshing and focused on what everyone in the horror ASIM genre was missing, a casual, fun experience. And while the beta didn't have as much content as the live release, there was still a ton to test out. With 2 roles to queue for, players were given a team split that had never been done for a horror ASIM. 4 victims versus 3 family members. And despite some initial reservations, it worked out pretty well. Each victim was distinct too. Instead of being merely cosmetics with shareable perks, they had distinct talents where players could choose from a bruiser, tank, locksmith, or a support. On the other side of the aisle, players could choose from 3 of the iconic family members, Hitchhiker, Cook, and our poster boy himself, Leatherface. Hitch and Cook were both enjoyable, but Bubba, he was arguably the most fun, destroying barricades, stores, crawl spaces, and even chasing victims across the map. The gameplay loop didn't feel boring either. As victim, you spawn tied up in the basement with the goal to break free, find tools, and activate any of the 4 unique exits: the generator, car battery, valve, and fuse. With each exit requiring a different approach, most players had a plan ahead. Unsurprisingly, the fuse box was the most challenging route of all, not because it required an unlocked tool or randomly spawning fuse, but mainly because players or streamers couldn't count past a first grade level.
What? What?
Having a variety of exits like this felt great as well, because it didn't trap players in a box. You really could play however you wanted, whether you wanted to stealth by hiding in closets, or go loud and proud jumping through windows, or diving through wells. As long as you left before the bleed out timer began, the choice was yours. It was clear that developers put a ton of time into creating a truly immersive world. By handcrafting their sound design, recording animations with mocap suits, or adding countless references to the original film, their efforts made for an unforgettable experience. Even the original actor behind Hitchhiker reprised his role in game, further exciting diehard fans. And while there were a few bugs like lobby crashes or the inability to queue, it was still one of the best optimized betas I had ever participated in. After a grueling 5 months of waiting, Texas Chainsaw Massacre would finally be released on August 18th of 2023. To the community's surprise, there was a ton of extra content released that we weren't aware of during the beta. 1 new victim, 2 family members, and 2 unique maps. And while all this extra content was great, the most impressive on launch were the maps. The gas station and slaughterhouse were incredibly immersive and beautifully made, both being nods to the original film. And while the balance wasn't perfect, it was quickly determined that their map crafting was their strong suit. Character customization was also greatly expanded on release. During the beta, it was pretty bare bones, but now each of the characters had their own talent tree, skill tree, and attribute system, and you could craft a ton of different builds depending on your playstyle. Despite there being more bugs on release than the beta, it was still a great time and the developers deserved the success they gained. But looking at the title of this video, it's obvious that this era of TCM didn't last long. Out of all the live service games I've played, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was easily the one with the most potential, and yet the developers at Gun Interactive wasted it. Even release of Evolve back in 2015 looks tame in retrospect compared to it. It only took Gun a few weeks to make their first major mistake, and it had big ripple effects. On release, it became clear that cheat developers saw the game as a new market, causing tons of games to be ruined by a minority of the player base, and these cheaters loved to target streamers at the time too, all in an effort to promote their cheating client to more people. It made the devs look like total amateurs. TCM was in development for years, and they didn't put the most basic effort in for a proper anti-cheat. After much consideration, they chose to make the short-sighted decision to disable crossplay in matches early September. This was due to the fact that the grand majority of cheating services are offered on PC, not console. And the reasoning was, if PC had most of the cheaters, then this is a good temporary solution, right? Well, no, not at all. Every PC player would still have to deal with the rampant cheaters plaguing matches, and console players wouldn't be able to play with their PC friends. And this wouldn't be such a big deal if it didn't remain deactivated for over a whole month right after its release. The whole co-op killer idea was a big selling point for people, and this entire ordeal caused tons of people to refund or uninstall the game. The reporting system remained useless too. You couldn't write out the reason for the report in-game. You had to submit video evidence online to report somebody, which is a pretty ancient method. I can't tell you how many people reported for cheating or threatened streamers with violence just to see them on the game the very next day. Arguably, the biggest problem that plagued TCM was the downtime, especially in the lobby and loading screens. There is just so much waiting for a lobby, waiting for it to fill with players, waiting for the 3-minute timer to tick down. Oh, did someone unready? Sorry, timer's restarted. Did someone leave? Sorry, got restarted again. Now you have to wait for the lobby to fill again and wait even longer. The dodging in TCM was insufferable, and players did it for tons of reasons. Maybe they didn't get the character they wanted, or didn't like the map, didn't like the enemy team comp, or something as simple as seeing other people being in a party together. The lobby system was one of the biggest turnoffs for most players, because what do you mean over half of my game's hours were spent in the lobby? There were solutions to this, such as turning the intro cinematic into a character select screen. That way, when someone queues for a match, they're instantly put in the game, not a lobby. If someone DCs, then they get a penalty. What did they do instead? They removed visible levels, party icons, and added a 3-minute DC penalty if you dodged a lobby, all of which worsened the situation. There were countless times when a lobby would reset with not enough players, and people would still receive a penalty, even if they didn't dodge. But there wasn't a penalty if you left after the game started, which made zero sense. Hell, even a rematch function could have been added, or maybe even allowing duplicate characters, since some were understandably frustrated that they couldn't play a character they paid for. Instead of being honest and listening to the community during developer live streams, they decided to disrespect their player base at every turn.
On behalf of all the community, can you apologize for everything your community is going through with your game? We never heard sorry. I'm not sure what there is that needs to be apologized for, but if you feel that an apology is needed, absolutely, I'll say it. I'm sorry that you're going through things.
It also didn't help that during these same live streams, they loved to badmouth DBD as well in a snarky, indirect way, claiming they put much more effort into their characters than other games.
It would be far simpler for us to say, let's dress Leland up as a young scruffy guy who likes rock music and kick him out there with some new perks.
We could very well just insert this, character with a name, and then all we have to worry about is just make sure that there's more perks thrown into the tree, and then let that be universally used by whomever or whatever. You could concentrate on that, and you could pump things out a lot faster. But it's not who we are as a company. It's not the type of things we want to make.
For a game that was in disrepair, it was strange that the lead developers were more focused on disrespecting others and boasting about their game rather than actually fixing their problems. During these streams, they also made many unfulfilled promises regarding roadmaps rather than giving meetable deadlines. Their go-to saying being, "Stay tuned."
There's a shirtless Johnny coming. When? You have to stay tuned. The second part of that question.
That's a stay tuned. Yeah, I put in stay tuned. It's the third stay tuned.
Shockingly, there also weren't that many patches in the game's lifespan. There were about 9 patches in 2023, 15 in 2024, and only 3 in 2025. You would think that with less patches, it would be quality over quantity, right? Well, no. Major updates were few and far between, and when the community did get new content, Gun seemed to miss the mark on one of the biggest issues, the pricing. Sure, $40 for a new popular game isn't bad, but the DLC content was way above market rate. $10 for one new character, not the whole chapter, is insane. No matter the depth or love it has, players just don't want to pay that rate, especially when there's no free earnable currency in game. What was worse is that the new characters were incredibly pay to win too, completely breaking the fundamental gameplay loop. The major example being Danny, who could instantly tamper an exit to open it for an extended period of time. The family would be unable to shut off a tampered exit as well, and sometimes his power would just bug to cause it to remain open forever. This obviously led a lot of players to either quit or take a break from the game, and I can't blame them. Having pay-to-win characters wouldn't be as severe if it didn't take on ages to patch and balance them. Many players may remember a bug involving Sissy, which caused the perk of rubber legs to slow victims to a crawl where they couldn't move at all. And their biggest patch of all, claiming 250 bug fixes in testing, ended up just being very minor bug fixes that most players would never come into contact with. So it just seemed like they were patting themselves on the back when it came to new updates rather than actually caring. When Gunn wasn't hosting their live streams, they were busy trying to gaslight the community that certain bugs weren't bugs at all, and that they were working perfectly as intended, just like on release. But when you compare the footage from present and release, they are very different. The final disappointment was that they avoided added more unique exits to new maps, just the same ones on repeat, which felt pretty lazy. They had 3 additional maps post-launch, and they only bothered to add 1 more unique exit to their final and most negatively received map, the Graveyard. This map, compared to prior expansions, was not only boring, but incredibly unbalanced, which is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this game. I and many others believe that the golden era of TCM was during its first 3 months, the time when devs genuinely put effort into keeping the game as casual as possible. And with tons of players not fully understanding the macro mechanics of the game, it didn't feel too competitive, not yet at least. The skill trees were also designed to force players to pick and choose what kind of build they wanted. Some perk combos would just be too strong if allowed, so we had to be picky. Unfortunately, this would not last forever. Players would squeeze every drop of efficiency out of the game's mechanics. The biggest example by far was the rush meta, and it's exactly how it sounds. Many players would disregard playing stealthy and would book it to the nearest exit by any means. And for newer players, it was very difficult to prevent. Most games would progress by the family feeding grandpa with blood for information, but players would curb this by either stealthing to avoid the aura reading, stabbing grandpa to reduce his power, or by simply rushing. Games could literally last less than a minute once victims left the basement. All they needed to do is use Connie to instantly unlock a major door, have Leland stun the family, and another player to focus the objective. Pair this with bone scrap knives and slamming doors to stun the family, and some players would be untouchable. The most popular map to form this was Family House, where players would instantly jump out the window to escape the main road. And there were a ton of balanced solutions to this, such as increased family damage at the beginning of matches, harder objectives, increased setup speed, or even faster grandpa blood progression. But the best the developers came up with was removing the grandpa wake-up cinematic, start the match with generator and car battery turned on, and having victims start the match with their abilities on cooldown. As we all know, the killer role in horror ASIMs is usually the power role, and it should be that way. By doing a deep dive on the balance of victim versus family, a theme becomes clear. An overwhelming majority of nerfs towards the base game were directed towards the victim role, and buffs towards the family. Don't get me wrong, victim was too strong during the beta and early release, but after a few of these major patches, the line became much more blurry. The most significant changes were, of course, stun immunity for the family and removing the Leatherface requirement for matches. Beyond that, there were a ton of changes, so pause to read if you're interested. Taking away this much player agency to mitigate balance issues is fine, but only taking and never giving eventually leads to staleness for both sides.
This went against their fundamental philosophy of development as well. They constantly assured the player base that they would stick to a more casual side of balance, and with every patch that came out, it felt more and more competitive.
The game's supposed to be fun. The game's not supposed to be competitive, right? Like, that's not the point of the game. The point of the game is get in and have a blast and feel like you're living in the world of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. What we don't lean into is the competitive side of it, because it starts to breed a different type of player. It's not one that's right or wrong. It skews off of friendship sometimes. It starts to create a different atmosphere that doesn't fit into what I think the game's supposed to be, or even the IP itself.
It's safe to say that the balancing decisions towards the base gameplay mechanics drove many players away, regardless of what role they played. And honestly, most of these problems can be blamed by one simple thing: laziness. Over the course of 2 years, TCM only added 7 new characters and 3 new maps, and much of the new content was completely unfinished on release, suffering from bugs, overlooked balance problems, and most embarrassingly enough, an unjustified price tag for every character. Sure, some of the new characters were fun. Wyatt had throwable knives that could stun the family, kill nuggets, and turn off objectives. Virginia had smoke bombs that healed her team and blinded the family, and Maria, well, she could sweet talk grandpa, which wasn't that useful. The most problematic releases by far were Danny and Hans. Danny completely broke the already unstable balance of the game and wasn't nerfed for over 3 months after his release. The only real solution Gunn had was to release a family character that could counter his power. And Hans was arguably even more broken than Danny, and players knew him. He was a one-man army being able to barge victims, destroy barricades, electrify fences, destroy fuses and valve handles, and most impressive of all, instantly shut off open exits. It was clear that new content wasn't really Gunn's strong suit. They even tried releasing a new 1v6 mode called Rush Week, where Johnny would take center stage as the main antagonist of matches. Games would play out more similar similarly to Friday the 13th. One killer versus 6 sorority girls.
With 3 routes to choose from: calling the police, using the car radio, and hiding in the attic.
And to no surprise, this mode was very buggy on release too, leading to long queue times and people quitting mid-match. It didn't help either that any issues took ages for Gunn to even look at, let alone fix. The most notable problem was in the form of Johnny's speed during his lunges. He could equip certain stamina reduction perks to essentially sprint lunge around the map. It was obviously not intended and very frustrating to play against. Gunn would try to remedy this by removing the extra speed caused by the lunge, but no matter how many attempts, they could never successfully figure out how to fix it.
So he's supposed to have that lunge. What he's not supposed to do is gain speed by swinging his weapon.
And remember when I briefly mentioned the rubber legs exploit on Sissy? Yeah, there were a ton of exploits that Gunn neglected to fix for months. The most notable ones involving the water tank and Leatherface's chainsaw. Normally, it would take around 10 seconds to turn off the valve tank, granting a window for victims to interrupt this with a stun or backstab. But some players found that with a combination of inputs, they could turn it off instantly, completely preventing any potential progress. Even worse, it was discovered that Leatherface could completely override stun animations. His stun length was designed to be long because of his advanced mobility, but if a player simply rev their chainsaw during a stun, they could immediately end the animation and kill the victim. And if they timed the revving during a sprint correctly, they wouldn't be stunned at all. The victim would receive a notification and points for the stun, but Leatherface would avoid the stun and still be granted stun immunity. Some players would argue these were simply texts, but even the developers labeled them as exploits, but made no effort to quickly fix them or reprimand players who knowingly abused them. Tons of players quit over these bugs, and the lack of concern from Gunn was astonishing. And when Gunn didn't know how to fix a bug, well, they simply incorporated it into their game's design. Hitchhiker traps at one point had a bug interaction with ladders. If a victim who climbed a ladder stepped into a trap after the animation, they would experience interaction issues with traversing gaps and other parts of the map. Instead of fixing this bug, Gunn simply removed the ability to place traps on ladders. This wasn't the only time this happened either. During the release of the mill map, Leatherface could no longer be stunned by any door or gate, which obviously became a problem. Gunn's solution to this was to lazily remove Leatherface's stun animation during these interactions and replace it with a new, albeit shorter one, and people weren't happy about it either. Much to the community's dismay, there were hardly any quality of life additions to the game throughout its entire cycle. There were tons of suggestions made towards the devs, and most of them fell on deaf ears. To resolve communication issues in game, there could have been a simple communication wheel or ping system added, since not everyone used the text or voice chat. More accessibility options like a playable tutorial, loadout presets, or even advanced keybind settings would have been really nice, especially for those pesky moments when the game shares the same key for multiple actions. They also never fulfilled their existing quality of life promises to raise the level cap, introduce free currency, or revamp the reporting system. And don't get me started on the cosmetics. Aside from a few collab skins, most of the cosmetics were pretty terrible. You were given a few free ones for just playing, but every DLC pack was essentially just one cosmetic with several recolors, and the ones that were sold individually felt lackluster. Granted, Shirtless Johnny and Wedding Dress Sissy weren't bad by any means, and were more importantly free, but the blackout cosmetics given as a reward for hitting max level, yeah, they were a complete mess. It just felt like they took a can of black spray paint and called it a day. The worst example being Sissy's version. The blackout looks almost identical to her default, which completely disappointed people. If the developers can't take pride in the little details, how can we expect the more important content to have any love or care? 2025 was the most grim year for TCM. With players dwindling and the community leaving, Gunn knew that the walls were closing in. Even with some people hoping for new content, they shortly announced that they would be discontinuing the dedicated servers and the game would become peer-to-peer. This would make the game unplayable with rampant cheaters, DDoSing, and widespread security issues. But with enough backlash from the community, they reversed the decision. But only time can tell how long they'll keep the servers running. It's a shame too. There was definitely a lot of canceled content, whether it was small hair DLC packs for victims or entire future DLC drops. At one point, they had planned to bring more licensed content from the Texas universe in the form of Chop Top from the second installment in the franchise, but that would eventually get canned too. At least we had several iconic actors make their mark on the game, those being Edwin Neal as the Hitchhiker, Barbara Crampton as Virginia, Chop Top's Billy Mosley as Bones, and the original Ghostface himself, Skeet Ulrich, as Wyatt. It's evident that TCM was a love letter to horror fans and easily had the most potential out of any horror game I've ever played. Throughout writing this video, I've come to sincerely miss the early days of TCM, and it's made me realize despite all its flaws, it's clear that Gunn is incredibly talented at crafting these immersive worlds, just not very well equipped to continue working on a live service product post-release. The failure of Texas Chainsaw Massacre was absolutely a preventable one too. If they had put more effort into listening to their community, they could have avoided the same fate as their counterparts. Tons of creators, gamers, and designers gave their insight on how to ensure the longevity of TCM, but instead they were more dedicated to their strict vision of how the game would look, timeline, cosmetics, and more specifically, gameplay. Nothing would disrupt their immersive experience, even the risk of failure. And honestly, I can respect preserving their idea of how they saw their game, never letting it evolve into something unintended. What I can't respect were the countless lies they told, slow work ethic, and endless displays of disrespect directed at their fans.
I called it when they said, guys, we have content through August planned. What does that mean, I say? We'll probably get like a few characters in a map every 2-3 months. No, there's gonna be a 5-month gap! 5-month gap between characters and maps is so bad, bro, and I called it!
Live service games are not meant to last forever. Even the most popular eventually fall into disrepair, and many become lost media, unable to be purchased, downloaded, or even played. But when developers give little care or attention to the product they're selling, its lifespan is cut into a fraction of its early potential. Gun isn't a new company either. They have experience, and more importantly, notoriety achieved from both their successes and failures. Gun's announcement that TCM's development would be sunsetted did not elicit any happy responses either. People were pissed, and understandably felt betrayed. With their last community update being a nothing burger essay with their final "stay tuned," it was just a middle finger to their most dedicated fans. And the sentiment was clear, that Gun should never be given another horror IP again. Unfortunately, it was shortly announced that Gun's next project would be an exclusive Michael Myers Halloween game, and from the limited footage we've received, it genuinely looks interesting. But it's obvious that their poor treatment of TCM left a lasting impression on the horror community, and Gun was forced to face the music. There were countless replies, posts, even videos outlining concerns for the game and warning people not to waste their money on another one of Gun's projects. Basically, calling for a boycott. The community's feelings are pretty justified. I want to see the game succeed because I love horror asim competition, but I and many others are smart enough to not blindly fall for Gun's empty promises again. If they want to find success in any new venture, it has to be proven with action and evidence, not just words.
Well, you got both of them.
Just open this door. Open this door. You'll be fine.
Boom!
I'm running.
Cutting people off and like.
Yeah. Look.
What the?
The fence, dude. He just killed me.
What? Why am I driving a whip, cuz?
Nah, yeah, get on your.
I ain't hear no bell, motherfucker!
Yeah, keep talking. Keep talking.
Microphone, tell this guy to get a better job.
Nah.
What? No, what was that?
I'm cheating!
You're telling me that he's on
The killers are too overpowered. This game f***ing blows.
Welcome for the meta.
I'm carrying you.
Playing meta.
I carry you.
You got
This
to
says
go back to
content.
the tutorial.
Yeah, nice trap, bozo. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive on Texas Chainsaw Massacre as much as I enjoyed making it. What was your favorite memory from the game? And do you have any hope for Halloween? Let me know, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.